this next one will kind of build on that and look a bit more at what kind of trends and forecasts we can expect in the UK market. So to bring on the expert who will help us with that, here to discuss it more is the Vice President of Forecast and Research at S&P Mobility, Henner Lena. Henner, welcome to the stage.
Good. Thank you, Megan. So I'm the last one today, standing between your dinner, your soccer, football, depending how you define it. This was very interesting, and he took half of my presentation already, Alessandro. So, but I can build on that and give you a slightly different perspective from, not that I'm a representative of the EU, but from the EU industry and what their thinking is on IAA, but we will get that in a moment. Before that, housekeeping. S&P Global Mobility. I was standing here actually probably like 5 years or 4 years ago, said, hey, look, we're S&P now. We used to be IHS Markit. Guess what? We're changing again. So we are changing every couple of years. So we're spinning off 2 weeks from now at New York Stock Exchange, public traded, under Mobility Global. So we will be, the mobility division of S&P will be standalone. So if you see this logo, this name, it's still us. Just different branding. We're now doing everything in blue, not black and red anymore. So I just needed to inform you because we were going to try to push very hard that the industry knows what we're doing, but you're getting the direct sneak preview. And yeah, it's S&P Global Mobility, our mastermind, our Carfax US brand. So we will be in standalone division as of next week, Wednesday. Right. Looking at the challenges, demand drivers challenges, what's shifting and why. And if we're looking at the industry, we were supposed to be, that changed? That didn't change? No, that changed as well. Okay. So we were supposed to be in steady state. 2026 for the automotive industry was supposed to be the year of recovery, and with all the ups and downs since COVID, which by the way is also already 6 years ago, it actually feels closer than it actually is. Chip shortage, Ukraine crisis, and so on and so on. Tariffs from the US administration. We were in steady state, and then came Strait of Hormuz. So we're carefully looking at the oil price, and we get reminded every day why there's no expert in oil price forecasting. So you can see the blue line was the original oil price. It spiked, and we actually have one of the biggest oil price teams still with S&P, and it's very difficult to look into that. Where we brought it up, we had a steep fall, now we extended it, and I bet you in July this will look again differently. Somebody who could accurately forecast it probably wouldn't be standing on the stage presenting. But what this shows, it is an issue. We even have an oil price shock scenario where we're looking at up to $200 per barrel. It seems the events in the recent days might be helping to get around this. Nevertheless, back to normal is no time soon. Of course, the markets reacted, but one thing when we're really analyzing the whole situation, not only the oil, but also the feedstocks in chemicals, in primary aluminum, and so on, one thing we see in Europe is these shocks have not even arrived yet because we're still living off inventory. Only now we will actually get the exposure, the price increase, the renegotiation of hedge prices on certain feedstocks. And now we have to see how quickly actually the situation in Iran can go back to normal, how big the damage really is, if there is a stabilization, which is also, we have seen peace call-outs on a weekly basis pretty much since a couple of weeks, and then there was still military action ongoing. But it has not even arrived. And the data I'm going to show you later is actually showing that a little bit. If you look at the demand side, of course, oil price at the pump, you drive by and said, oh, damn it, why do I pay so much? But is this really because there's not enough oil or gas? It's actually, it's a fear factor priced in. But the real as a feedstock into the industry, that's not even there yet. This is about to come now. And this is something we have to watch out for. And hopefully there is a result or resolving situation soon, because you can see way into 2027 or into 2027, we're still at $100 oil. And that is already bad news. $100 was always that barrier where things fall apart and everything gets more expensive. And this is something which at the moment is factored in. So it's going to be higher for much longer, which on the one hand could spur EVs, and there's a lot of discussion, is the uptick in EVs we're seeing in various markets now due to this. May could have been the first months where you could actually see that, because there's always a time lag of 1 to 2 months for new car buyers. But it's not proven. There is a feeling that there might be an effect, but it's actually, there's no evidence yet on it. Whereas there's evidence is in the used car market, which is then again bad for the new car market, because there you can see the pressure, you can measure how many cars are listed, and there you clearly see a result to the high oil prices that people are looking and searching, and to a certain degree also going into a transaction, depending where you are. Nevertheless, it is a shock in volume, and we took out from the January to now the June forecast 2.3 million units for this year. And so 2026 is not the recovery year anymore. We see another dip. And also next year we took more volume out, because one thing we see, inflation, energy is one of the big drivers of inflation, is going up. And also, and this is a little bit mixed into it, but doesn't directly have something to do with the Strait of Hormuz situation, the China car market. The China car market had significant incentives last year. So there's always that pull-ahead effect. You can model that. First quarter was supposed to be the payback, but then we saw April numbers coming in, May numbers coming in very, very low. So we also had to take another 1 million unit out. That's the problem about Chinese market. It's so big. If it slides in a lot of units. So this is what, in the end, is giving the demand outlook. So we're sitting by just under 90 million, 89.5 at the moment. And we're just doing another review and looking at it. So we're going to hold that number now for a while, because we believe this is where it is. Because another thing is, interest rates definitely going to go up. Even though the administration put their favorite candidate to the Federal Reserve in the US, in order to lower interest, it's going to go the other way. It's already priced in. A slight increase in second half is very likely to come. And that makes things even more expensive. And if you look, for example, at the US market, lengths of credits, financing amounts is extended. There's so much pressure on it. It's very difficult to get into the new car market at the moment. And this actually, as a side effect of this crisis, this will actually be accelerated. So that is where we sit for this year. Unfortunately, not that good news. On the production side, similar, not that much of a reduction as on sales, because we still had a little bit of inventory buffer, but we're taking also 1.9 million units out. Also, if we're looking at China, for example, China local demand is lower, but the production actually is still running stronger, because there is, of course, a push into the export markets. And that's also a theme we heard before, and we will see probably tomorrow as well. The Chinese activities in overseas markets, the strong push to actually be kind of like as a catalyst to the pressure in the own market is reducing production. But still, we're taking also quite some units out there. And yeah, again, also production market was supposed to be stabilized, and we have now another dip with around about 90.7 million units for this year. And next year, we're actually taking a little bit more out, 91.6 for inventory correction purposes. So what was supposed to be steady sailing, if shipment companies are here, it's not. It's another dip, and puts, again, pressure on everybody who is involved in the topic of automotive manufacturing, supply chain, logistics, the ecosystem around. It's not a year for recovery on a global scale. Of course, in patches, who you are, where you are, you will benefit slightly different or be hit slightly harder. One thing up front already, where do we see at the moment electrification? And I mentioned it, is the Iran crisis, if I call it like that, is this really a catalyst for electrification in Europe? At the moment, we're keeping our 23% EV share for this year. Some markets perform much stronger now in the latest numbers, but other markets we will see in a moment are still quite weak. So Europe is not a country. It's an assembly of 27, or in the end 29 countries, which are counting into this. And we're too early to say if there is an extra effect coming. And this already factors in some of the incentives where we're seeing, for example, in Germany and some other markets. So EV growing, but only to 41%. And if you look at the legislation we're going to look into later, you will actually see we would need to be already at 60% easily by 2030 in order to reach the 90%, which is now on the table as a discussion point for 2035. But I will get to that later, what our latest thinking is. There is growth, there is momentum, but it's not as strong as before. You can see full hybrids also gaining a little bit more attractiveness. PHEV relatively flat, especially in Europe. It's a technology which is talked about, a lot about, but it's not used correctly. I think also Alessandro said that 60% fleet drivers just ruined the PHEV. All the people with their company cars and their gas cards, never charging, driving always these little 4-cylinders with the large batteries on the highway. They pretty much ruined that game because the EU started measuring, and you probably saw the news, it's way over hundreds of % over what it's actually supposed to be according to WLTP testing cycle. So PHEV is in Europe a niche thing, and range extender I didn't even put on here because that doesn't exist at the moment, and in our view also not anytime soon in large quantities. US, the administration, Trump, killed the BEV. It's actually holding up quite steady still for that pretty much all punishment, all legislation was taken out. But, of course, the industry there wants to keep a foot in the door because there might be, in 2028, an administrative change, and then compliance is back, right? We had it, Obama, CAFE, Trump, safe, Biden came back, CAFE, back to the thin glide path, now Trump, whatever he's calling it, gone, not sure if he doesn't have a name for the program, might be back to CAFE. And then you are in trouble if you're not at least keeping the technology growing. So there will be some push, but they will do it very smart, very, very nuanced versus all the big announcements, what we saw. But one thing that's very interesting is the growth of hybrids. Full hybrid vehicles seems to be the thing in the US. The Japanese companies started a couple of years ago already, Honda, Toyota, now Nissan with their e-Power vehicle is also a big one coming now with the Rogue in this October. They're only offering full hybrid. Because why is a consumer actually accepting that? You don't have the hassle. You don't have to plug. You don't have range anxiety. But at the gas pump, especially with these high gas prices we're seeing, the hybrid versus a conventional 6-cylinder, for example, old technology, is actually giving you an advantage. And this is what's actually driving that. It's real consumer demand, no mandate. Nobody telling you what you have to drive. The consumer freely chooses, this is actually a technology I want to have. Therefore, hybrid is actually quite accelerating. It's actually their way to get to a more eco-friendly car fleet versus in Europe, it's BEV, and then of China, don't need to talk about it. BEV is pretty much the main driver. And even there, PHEV goes sideways, HEV goes sideways, because the BEV technology is so good already that, it's also not, PHEV is not in light of the BEV mandates anymore an advantage. So they're just jumping. Everything is BEV. If you have been to Beijing or seen the pictures or the reports, it's BEV in China, and there is no stop for now. Right, so that's a little bit what's going on in the world. So what's going on in Europe? This is European demand in a scenario view. And Europe, actually, as you can see from our upside-downside scenario, the swing is actually not too bad if you think at the total market. We have less than 1 million unit swing we're putting in right now. 15.3 for this year is our light vehicle demand for Europe. And when I call Europe, I say West Central Europe. So there's some, like Serbia, non-EU countries in there. UK is in there, of course. But the swing is actually not too bad. So as said at the beginning, besides the high energy prices, the crisis has not fully hit Europe yet. And the quick resolution of the Iran crisis is actually something which could prevent further impact. So we're going more or less sideways, slight uptick, but overall, the market runs significantly, 3 million units below what it used to run. And one of the big reasons is the entry segments are gone. A segment, A, B segment entry, Audi A1, the small smart, and so on, right? There's the Opel Adam or Vauxhall Adam. All these vehicles gone, right? Too expensive to get them emission compliant, and that is pretty much the entire segment which is missing. And also with some of these Chinese players pushing in, they're not coming in with the entry cheap cars. They're coming in actually with quite big vehicles at a lower price point than the others, but the vehicles are quite big. So you need to have a certain amount of income, actually, to even enter the car market. So there's quite some volume taking out of the market. And at the moment, as it goes, even though Smart 4.2 will come back as an electric version, but it will come back probably cost you $25,000 for Smart. So that is why we're pretty much going sideways and pretty much have a trend level reset for the European market in total. Of course, if you look at some countries are suffering more. For example, in UK, we have a different view than, for example, in Spain or in Poland, the Czech. So if you look in the mix under it, you will see slightly different dynamics. But overall, the market has pretty much a reset. And even on the production side, you see the same. Of course, this AB segment car decline, which I just mentioned, the pullout of these segments has an impact. So we used to be nearly a 90 million unit production unit, light vehicles is this, in Europe. And now we're actually, I messed up the chart. This is, of course, not 19.8. This is 15. But yeah, you can see it, the lines. It is running way lower than before. And again, the pullout of the segments is one issue, but also the onshoring. The onshoring into China, which happened over the years, into the US, into other markets, the push, for example, of production capacities into Northern Africa. And we're getting to that when we talk about AIA in a moment, because they're also not part of the EU and have a similar UK problem. Where we said, bring your cheap vehicles to Turkey, into Tunisia, into Morocco. This is your hub for cheap LCVs. And they would be as hit as what Alessandro said. And you can also see the UK share used to be 10%, will all the way go down to 4% in the production footprint in Europe. So from that point of view, a clear trend also of deindustrialization, if you would look at it like that. Another view to look at it is capacities. And in the world, we're actually facing a major overcapacity issue. Last year, we were around about 93 million units in production, and we had 158 million units in installed capacity. So we were at a utilization just above 50%. There are better ones, Japan, Korea, very good, with over 80. 85, you normally say, is a profitable way to run a plant. But then you have others. You have Europe, you have, of course, China, with sometimes in single-digit capacity utilization, but also we have that in Europe. Italy, Mirafiori, Fiat 500 plant, runs at 9% utilization of original installed capacity. It's an absolute disaster. It's just kept alive to have people go to work still. It's probably government funded. It's very, very, very bizarre, that situation. And you have these pockets. Therefore, that discussion, which also happens in Germany, where the car makers say, do we open up the factories for some of the Chinese to come in and actually take capacity to utilize, to help them actually, because they're going to come anyways, right? Let's at least keep the labor here. That there is a clear reason to that. Even like for Volkswagen, the Zwickau, the Moser plant, at the moment it's actually quite utilized. It runs at 82%. But the next 2 years, most of the EVs will go out. And then there's only Audi Q4 left, and maybe another Audi will go in. And then that thing runs at 40% utilization. So what do? Do you open it up for your Chinese partners? Would they actually be willing to come? Because can they produce at the costs they need to be producing there? So these are all consideration and gamings which are going on in the industry right now, because capacity got reduced. We used to be quite healthy, pre-crisis, 82% utilization in 2017, but now we're on average, we did not take enough volume out. So what either you do, you bring in more in, utilize the capacities you had, or you continue to cut. And the cutting was already quite brutal. We see it in the UK, we saw it with Honda, with Nissan, we see it in Germany, we see it every market, Flins in France. It's a long list of capacities, plants which already got shut down. Saint-Louis plant from Ford. Look at what they did to Cologne, Valencia, and so on. I don't want to pick on any brand. So everybody is pulling out, but is that enough? Or do we actually need to pull out even more to shrink to healthy levels, or open the door for others to come in, if this is even possible? Because the Chinese, of course, have a different way of manufacturing of assembly, and can they actually get to the cost basis they need to have in order to be profitable and competitive in their view what they want to do. Coming to the UK, UK production 2 million in 2017, also at the peak point. Longer term, just above 1 million in our view. Light vehicle, no, actually that is a capacity installment for light vehicles, and then the production 1.8 to pretty much 0.6. And again, you don't need to be a math genius. Utilization doesn't fit at the moment. You can see where in capacity we're going sideways. We're not assuming further things to close. It's similar like taking brands or car makers out of the forecast. It's very difficult. But this shows you this year something needs to happen, right? That line needs to go down. The question is, who is it, right? Who is going to do it? Or again, is there somebody else who can come in and take that capacity? And even on other areas where we heard it before, right? This is engine production. Engine production. UK used to be an engine production hub. 2.4 million units of engines coming out of here. Now 0.7. Of course, this also has to do with what we heard before, electrification, the switch of the industry in itself, but and transmission, of course, related to that. But if you then look, what is the investment in battery? We have, at the moment, we have 2 battery setups, the Nissan one, and I think the Cell one in the JR ecosystem. A couple others are planned, but this is also the irony of the European setup in general, and something which we have to look at in light of IA. The region which is so good in manufacturing and engineering is somehow not capable to set up battery manufacturing. It is an absolute irony. Everybody who's trying is struggling. You need to have Chinese help in order to do so. So if you look at legislation, how hard do you actually want to play it, right? For example, the local content on the cell production of IA, which we'll get to in a moment, can you actually do this with own power? We saw the Northvolt thing. We see the ambitions of VW. We see ACC. We see, of course, CATL. Even CATL is not fully assembling here. So it is super difficult. And you are at the lifeline of China at the moment. And that is also in your longer-term strategies a very important part. So what legislation you're setting if you don't actually have the feedstock in order to be self-maintaining. Because we saw it before, export of Chinese engineers in the battery space was just easily restricted as soon as the import tariffs came up. And China knows how to play its power there. And so I think when we get to the IA topic, there will be a lot of fine-tuning behind the closed doors taking place, because at the moment, it would not really function, not because of partners, but also about the components you need to source in and what that legislation says. It's a little bit with that 90% EV share, which we're getting to in a moment. Also, it's a nice desire, a nice wish, but physically just not possible. If we're looking at where are the vehicles coming from, so total market, 3.1 million, glorious days, 2015. We're at 2.4 now, and then we're going sideways. But with red, you can see lots of Chinese vehicles coming in, and that is, I would say, still a conservative view. Of course, there's a specialty here in the UK. The MG brand, SIC, a lot of people still think it's MG, actually in other European markets as well. So there's a heritage, a brand image to it, but also other brands, right? We have BYD, we have Chery quite strong pushing in with a Jakku brand, plug-in hybrids, for example. So there is a lot of activity, and we're discussing pretty much on a daily basis how much room can we get, how much is possible, because, yeah, at the moment it comes in with still relatively solid pricing, but we see already first ambitions where there is a cut taking place similar to China, where we would also have a price war. We know the Chinese industry doesn't want a price war here in Europe because that's the only place they could actually make money. But we see and I don't want to call up BYD, but I'm doing it. You can see a cut of nearly 45%, including incentives at the moment. A car which is 42,000 euros in Europe, at the moment in Germany, you can get for 24 with government incentive and a 10K on top incentive. And this is price war territory to push the vehicle to the market. So this line, depending on what also then the local government does, the associations and the legislator, that could grow significantly, and where we're giving it a steady flow on what we see under normal market conditions, but there is escalation potential definitely in there. And now, in the last couple of minutes, coming to regulation. As said, Europe is not a country. So looking at the EV topic first. And in Europe, I actually had UK included here. So we have the fast movers, right? Norway, Denmark, Netherlands, Finland. They're at high levels. They're accelerating. They're where you would need to be to achieve the targets. Then actually, you have the second market cluster, which is 20% of the share. This one has UK, Germany, France, and the big ones. Actually, these are the ones which actually would need to really accelerate in order to drive that compliance forward. And then the majority of the markets here is not accelerating. There's not really something happening. Even Spain is in there, Italy is in there, Czech Republic, and that is actually one of the issues. Even if Germany, France, Italy would be at 90%, which is a crazy number by 2035, the rest wouldn't be. And that is actually the issue. Europe is not a country. It has different speeds, different momentums, different governmental setups, right? And this is one thing we see. This is why I mentioned my US comment. Hybrid is a natural choice. We see if you mandate too strictly, the consumer will not take it. You can build the frame. You have to actually then execute on the frame, like charging, cheap energy, and so on. But you cannot force it. You cannot force feed it. And therefore, our long-term outlook is not seeing that even revised proposal which we see. And at the moment, the revised proposal is 90% CO2 with some green steel and biofuels offsets. But in the end, it's just window dressing. It's still the same thing as before. And in our view, this is not possible. And you all will have the charts in part of the app. So there's a handout, so you don't need to take pictures. And we can discuss later if you want. But there are 3 scenarios, and we believe that the third one, actually, to speed it up a little bit, 60% EV, and this is where we're at also with our forecast right now, 40% still tailpipe emission vehicles, plug-in, range extended, strongly hybridized vehicle. That is most likely the way forward, but it would mean that we're still with 7.5 gram non-compliant in overall fleet. But overall, this would be already an absolute victory for the market, because even that, to achieve that, you saw we're only going to 40% by 2030. Another 20% in just 5 years is very difficult if you look at the trajectory. So, and then the low carbon steel part, this is, let's see, right? The e-fuels, biofuels topic, that horse is dead. There is no e-fuels for the car market. There's no capacity, no refinery, and if it comes, it's used for something else, and besides you driving your car around. There are certain brands, like a Porsche, who need to keep that up to kind of justify the 911, and we still have a combustion engine until the end of mankind. There is no e-fuels in large quantities. That's not going to do it. So they will need to review this, probably this scenario, and then find a mechanism of maybe CO2 carbon trading in order to get there. But we strongly believe, and also our clients, and we work pretty much with everybody in the industry, is more on this path than on this path here, because that is still not feasible, even though we see the acceleration. Very last, IAA. Alessandro did a great job, explained you everything. Why is Europe doing it? Industry job cuts, right? The fear, in short, is Chinese manufacturers coming in, and they will bring their own supply chain, do more CKD than real CBU, bring all the parts in from China, and one supplier after the other will go away. So jobs are gone. Deindustrialization, what we're seeing already, the numbers are quite shocking. This is just 24, 25 numbers. Year to date, even, we're probably above the 100,000 already if you look at the plant closures. So that is, in the end, why there's a wake-up call. And behind closed doors, there seems to be actually an agreement for once in Europe, we need to do this. But then the question is, how do we do it? We know the French have their interests, the Germans have their interests, the Italians have somewhere in the middle of interest, The Central Eastern Europeans have the interest because they're actually getting a lot of these investments from the Chinese coming in and said, why should we punish them? And then, of course, the ones who are already sourcing parts, the Western manufacturers, out of China for their current lineup. So the cutting will be very, very difficult to actually cut it without shooting yourself in the foot. And then we had the UK example. What's happening with the UK? We saw the importance of the UK, but if the UK is actually included, what happens with Morocco? What happens with Turkey? With all these hubs, you guys told us we have to invest there. This is where we're building jobs and building our commercial vehicle fleet. What's happening with those markets, right? Are we relying on these markets for other things? AI programming, data centers, energy, and it is very, very complex at the moment. And at the moment, if we're looking at that, this is also, Alessandro already explained that, we foresee at the moment that this legislation, because they will discuss it to death, not before 2028. 2028 is when it could become active if they really find a consensus. And then pretty much in a 3-year cut window, they will make it stricter and stricter if they are able to really find that consensus. Because consensus is there that something needs to be done, but who is winning, who is getting something, it's a little bit like industry consolidation in China, right? Everybody said it has to come, but don't touch my plant, right? Not my province, not my factory, not my brand. And this is a similar issue the market is running into here. And it's also not going to stop just as passenger cars. Actually, heavy trucking is another one. There's a lot of dubious things going on with some of the local European truck makers already who are sourcing parts, engines with some of their joint venture partners. I'm not going to name things, but that is also under a lot of scrutiny because the question is, trucks, or especially buses, public purchase, right? 80% of the buses, it's more than even the normal passenger fleet, are in public hands, city buses and so on. Why would we finance our jobs to be eliminated by them somehow cutting corners and sourcing parts where they shouldn't? Or, yeah, that shouldn't. I could stand that. Keep it like that. Yeah, and that is pretty much our timeline, our view on it. And now I'm 5 minutes over, and we have time for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hanner.